Final Fantasy XIV's first expansion, Heavensward, took the foundation built in A Realm Reborn and built a goddamn holy castle called Ishgard on top of it. Heavensward was a masterpiece in storytelling and delivered one of the best narratives in the entire Final Fantasy series. Couple that with the much improved design of pretty much every type of content in the game, and you had a fantastic MMO that no doubt someone called the WoW killer. I mean, of course, it wasn't, but that's besides the point. After the amazing roller coaster that Heavensward provided that topped anything in A Realm Reborn in pretty much every way possible, you of course had people looking forward to the 3.x patches and the new content that would come with them. However, the 2.x patches that had preceded Heavensward were a complete and utter shit show, and there was cause for concern that the 3.x patches would end up the same way. Hours of garbage to slog through for 2 years until the next expansion came out. Luckily, all of these fears proved to be unfounded, and what we got were a set of patches with moments and story beats that surpassed even what was initially added in Heavensward. Those are the patches we'll be talking about today. This video covers the first part of the 3.x patches that served to tie up the Heavensward storyline. For those unfamiliar, that is the 3.1 to 3.3 patches, also known as the Dragonsong War patches. This video will give a note as to what each patch added in terms of content, but will primarily focus and revolve around the story found in the Dragonsong War patches, what they do well, and my general opinion on them. So yeah, this video is going to have a lot of spoilers in it. So if you have not played through Heavensward, I highly recommend you go do so. This video won't be going anywhere after all. But for those of you who have played through it, or simply don't care about spoilers, let's get into it. As always, my name is Lokidum, and this is So I Played Final Fantasy XIV's Dragonsong War patches. Released on November 10th of 2015, patch 3.1 As Goes Light, So Goes Darkness was the first major content patch since the launch of Heavensward nearly 5 months earlier. 3.1 added a bunch of new content and made a bunch of changes that really should have been made in 3.0 itself. I mean, damn, level 50 dungeons didn't reward experience until 3.1 came out. Some of the biggest content additions were a new dungeon, the first 24-man raid of the expansion, the Vanu Vanu Beast Tribe quest, and most importantly, gathering heaven or hell, everyone's favorite place, the Diadem. Anyway, as for the MSQ in 3.1, it came in the form of 8 quests that sadly did not involve any dungeon or trial. However, the MSQ in this patch does a fantastic job of picking up right where Heavensward had left off and immediately sees you accompanying Sir Imric on a trip to broker peace with Heavensward. The duo seeks out Heavensward's daughter Vidofnir, who offers to beseech her father for an audience in exchange for the Warrior of Light dealing with the Nath. You know, just another day for the Warrior of Light. If this was a single-player game, no doubt this would be the short epilogue after the credits, and everything would be quickly and happily resolved. But this is an MMO, so things can't be that simple. Surprisingly, this patch introduces a lot of important characters to the rest of the game, and brings back characters we hadn't seen since the Sultana shenanigans in 2.5. Namely, it brought back the pretty boy Thancred, except now he's an edgelord. I saw this as an improvement as I found his character pretty damn annoying in A Realm Reborn, but his fanboys and fangirls saw this as an improvement for, well, other reasons. The new important characters I'm referring to is the only useful Lalafell in the entirety of the MSQ named Kryl, and the Warriors of Darkness. I pointed out in my video on the 2.x patches that Final Fantasy XIV has a habit of setting up the expansion after the next, and the same thing happens here as the Warriors of Darkness are the setup to Shadowbringers, which of course followed after the Stormblood expansion. The Warriors of Darkness were a very interesting addition and were the first morally grey villains that were in Final Fantasy XIV. The writing in the game managed to make these mysterious characters meaningful and prevented them from feeling like filler characters. The whole concept of hero turned villain is nowhere close to being a new one, but the Warriors of Darkness are a pretty good example of how the trope can be executed well. While you may not be able to sympathize with them the same way that you can with characters like Emmett Selk later on, you can at least understand them and why they are doing what they are. But of course, not everything about them is revealed in this patch alone. Anyways, back to dragons. After petitioning Heavensward, the old worm gives his kin the choice of what to do, and his kin, led by Vidofnir, chooses to walk the path of peace and attend Sir Imric's peace talks. However, some Ishgardians have other ideas. You see, when you overthrow a political system and church that has been in place for over 1,000 years, not everyone is going to be happy. In fact, they can be murderous, as these specific Ishgardians are. I mean, just look at this.
Honorable men, to whom Sir Emmerich was no hero, but a scheming patricide.
I mean, that seemed pretty murderous to me. But it doesn't just stop there, and Ishgard falls into a temporary civil war between the Warrior of Lights group and the fanatics who stabbed Imeric. This gives us some pretty cool scenes like charging into the vault and Vidofnir swooping in to save a falling child. But after this we get some more changes in the Ishgardian political system as Artoriel takes over leadership of House Vartams, and we get to see a bit more about the Warriors of Darkness and their plans, before finally ending on a scene with the last two scions that remain unaccounted for at this point. That's Ida and Papalymo. I mean, they are kinda shoehorned in here, but as great as setting up Shadowbringers is, the writers kinda also needed to set up the following expansion to Heavensward, Stormblood. Story-wise, this patch really doesn't miss a beat and takes the momentum from the end of Heavensward expansion and kicks the 3.x patches into full gear straight out of the gate. While it is an excellent continuation to 3.0, 3.1 lays its own groundwork to later expand upon, and surprisingly the groundwork is solid and manages to make Ishgard and its situation even more complex, and that's right after you thought it was grinding to a halt with the ending of 3.0. Though this is simply the prologue for what else is to come in the next two patches. Released on February 23rd of 2016, patch 3.2, fittingly titled The Gears of Change, brought with it 11 new main story quests, the dungeon, the anti-tower, and a few emotes that are unlocked throughout the patch. Alongside that came the new Alexander Metis raid tier, another new beast tribe with the Nath, a new trial, and a whole lot of rebalancing. On the MSQ side of things, we finally found out what happened to Minfilia. Turns out she is trapped in the ether and Hydaelyn had a hand in it, of course. This alone truly convinced me that Hydaelyn was the good guy. They got rid of the most annoying scion after all. Honestly, that is enough to make me willing to serve the Talking Crystal for eternity. However, at the beginning of 3.2, that is simply a theory, and we had to go send to the top of the anti-tower to test it, which of course was the 3.2 dungeon. Once we reached the top of the anti-tower, we were able to make direct contact with Hydaelyn, who is now too weak to even properly communicate to the Warrior of Light. So, because of that, Hydaelyn kidnapped Minfilia and brainwashed her into being simply the Word of Mother, who then fills us in on a whole bunch of exposition and lore of the world. Scratch what I said earlier, Hydaelyn brainwashed Minfilia into a different person, but even then, all Minfilia does is talk. Nothing else. Though, luckily this time it's actually useful information and it is quite interesting. Though, once again, none of this has any importance until Shadowbringers. I think Square Enix cares about Stormblood about the same as the general player base does, i.e. sometimes forgetting it exists. But anyway, back to Ishgardian politics. Peace talks with the dragons are not going as smoothly as you'd hope they would be. The people of Falcon's Nest and the rest of the frontier are not happy about the prospect of peace, thinking that if it comes to pass, their family and friends died for nothing during the Dragonsong War. I mean, that is a pretty dumb viewpoint, as for normal civilians, the goal of war is to eventually have peace again. Anyways, this leads to a bunch of conspiracy theories that quickly spread among the people, collectively lowering their IQ, which is quite a feat considering that Twitter doesn't exist in the FF14 universe. As if things couldn't get any worse, the dumbass known as Emmanuelian gives an order that causes a guard to shoot a protester in the chest, and of course this only causes more chaos. Panicking at the immense backlash, Imeric sets up a grand melee against the Eorzean Grand Companies and has us represent Ishgard alongside its soldiers. What does this mean for us? Well, we just get to go into what is honestly a fantastic solo duty and beat up our allies with no consequences. It's great, and the final boss is Rabon, which makes it even better in my book. Since the Ishgardian people are, well, they're the Ishgardian people, so watching a bunch of grown men and women beat each other up with swords is like a dream come true and is enough to settle them all down. And the official peacemaking ceremony could finally commence and everyone could live happily ever after. And so it was that Imeric and Vidofnir took the stage, agreed to peace in a ceremony that totally wasn't interrupted by a possessed dragoon. God damn it, Estinian, you've gone and betrayed us again! Though this time, it's actually not his fault, due to being possessed by Nidhogg. Stinhogg, as I'll call him, shows up and interrupts the ceremony, declaring war once more against Ishgard and its people, claiming he cannot be stopped. He seems to have already forgotten what happened last time. But anyway, Stinhogg then launches himself at Vidofnir and impales the dragon with his lance, leaving the mural meant to symbolize peace covered in blood. The crowd starts to chant angrily, and we see the Warrior of Darkness once more, before once again closing the patch on a scene of Papalymo and Ida. Honestly, while this is a pretty decent patch, it is by far the worst that was in the Dragonsong patches. Which is weird to say, because by no means is this patch bad, it's just that it seems lackluster compared to the other 3.x patches. While this did answer a lot of questions about the world and gave more insight into how it came to be, it just feels sort of out of place with the rest of the patch. I know the lore we are given here is pivotal down the road, but I feel like it is added here to simply extend the patch's runtime, and it would have been a much better fit in the later 3.x patches. The Grand Melee was awesome though, so I can't complain much. Concluding the Heavensward story arc, patch 3.3 Revenge of the Horde hit the game on June 7th of 2016. This patch included 6 new main story quests which involved a new dungeon and trial, a new 24-man raid, a new treasure map dungeon, and a huge change with the addition of Raid Finder. On the MSQ side of things, this is by far and away the most epic patch in the entirety of the 3.x patches. This patch serves as the thrilling conclusion to not only the 3.x storyline, but also to 3.0. This is the place where loose ends are finally tied, and Ishgard is finally set free from a millennia of torment and tormenting. While the end of 3.0 puts an end to the storyline of King Thordan and his church, Revenge of the Horde puts an end to the Dragonsong War as a whole. Our first goal in this patch is to once again beseech the power and wisdom of Hraesvelgr in hopes of getting his aid to kill Nidhogg once and for all, and finally put an end to the war between man and dragon. Though he declines at first, all of our allies, including Midgardsormr, argue against him in favor of ending the war. Eventually, Hraesvelgr decides to test our resolve in the dungeon of Sorkai, where he is the final boss. Immediately after completing Hraesvelgr's trial, a Stinhogg begins his attack against Ishgard, and we go to confront him in the climactic final battle. An amazing trial worthy of its name, the final steps of faith. Everything about this trial is the definition of epic. Before the fight even begins, we get an amazing cutscene of Ishgardians doing battle with Nidhogg's brood, and afterward get to see Hraesvelgr and Nidhogg fight ferociously against each other in the sky. The cinematography, the music, and the way it swells and falls, the dialogue between the two, the sound effects, everything about this scene is absolutely perfect, and to me, this is the best moment in the entirety of Final Fantasy XIV's main story, even beating out similarly amazing moments like at the end of Shadowbringers. Then we get our turn to fight Nidhogg, and it is just as amazing as the cutscene. But instead of the normal high-octane or more intense music that we are used to in these types of climactic fights, instead, the Dragonsong plays during the beginning of the battle, and there is no track more fitting to this moment than that. The somber track perfectly encapsulates everything that has happened up to that moment in Heavensward's story. And as the fighting grows more intense, the music changes with it. The somber dragon song changes into the hopeful freefall, which once again changes into the both angry and triumphant track that is Revenge of the Horde. There is no better moment in Final Fantasy XIV than this. It nails everything it possibly can. When we have finally defeated Nidhogg, the Warrior of Light and Alphinaud rush towards Estinian and attempt to pull the eyes of Nidhogg off of him. While at first they struggle, once Estinian himself starts to fight against Nidhogg's influence, they are finally able to free the Azure Dragoon from the will of the worm. The Warrior of Light and Alphinaud rush to the edge and throw both of Nidhogg's eyes into the abyss that is the Holy Sea, hopefully never to be seen again.
One soul's cry, a passion welling within. Sacrifice, a binary to her king.
The eyes! Cast them into the abyss!
Yet this bond of hope, my treachery was broke, scattering her words to the wind.
Once this battle is done, major changes come to Ishgard, and they implement a newly elected government to take over the city-state. Ishgard finally achieves the peace it has desired, with both highborn and lowborn elves now united, and the Dragonsong War officially over. Of course, once that threat is dealt with, another takes its place, or rather it starts to show its hand. That is the Warriors of Darkness, who end up attacking Alize, who has been tailing them for unknown reasons. And she would have died if not for Thancred, who had also been tailing the Warriors of Darkness since the initial failed peace ceremony. That concludes this patch's story, but also that of the entire expansion. I really have nothing more to say aside from that this was the perfect ending that I don't think could have been any better in any way, shape, or form. 3.3 is Final Fantasy XIV at its very best, and though other moments have come close, none have yet topped the moment that is the showdown in the final steps of Faith. The Dragonsong War patches are as close to a perfect ending as you could possibly get. They add so much to the overall experience of Heavensward and are truly the expansion's crowning jewel. There is so many things that they simply did perfectly in these 3 patches. The dialogue, the fights, the music, the storyline, everything matched perfectly with what was happening at the time and what had led up to those moments. While Heavensward by itself was already a masterpiece, these patches bring it to a whole new level of amazing. This is even more impressive when you look back and see how bad the 2.x patches were, and every gripe I had with those patches have been completely fixed in these 3.x patches. Luckily, 4.x and 5.x continue to follow 3.x's example, making these patches not only fantastic on their own, but foundational to the structure of the patch sets that would follow it. So, if you somehow found yourself quitting the game after Heavensward and didn't bother with these patches, come back and play them, as they are 110% worth your time. Well, that's the end of the video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Originally, I planned to include patches 3.4 and 3.5 in this video as well, but it makes more sense from a narrative perspective to split these later patches up from these earlier ones. Not to mention it helps keep both videos at a reasonable length and nothing near my 32-minute 3.0 video. I still don't know how I got that one out on time. Anyway, as always, my name is Lokidum, thank you for watching, and have a great day.
Thus were the notes of the Dragonsong rewritten, the din of war giving way to a rising litany of peace and